and visible, right?
Yes. We're ready.
Yes, Professor Stephen Krashen. So you are a prominent linguist and language acquisition expert. So I'm so blessed to have you today in this talk. So I'd like to start today's talk with you. What inspired you to pursue the research in the field of linguistics and language acquisition?
I discovered when I was in my 20s what my life's purpose was. I'll tell you what happened. Until that time, student, I had failed my classes at the university in and out because I didn't know what my interests were. I have an idea, theory, hypothesis that so that's my life has been happy since then. And working on languages is a big part of the research. Working on my own language acquisition.
Yeah.
This has been very good for the theory. All right. This caused me to change my theory, etc. That's how it started. And it's been that way, I'd say, for 60 years now. I started in my 20s. I'm in my 80s now. And it's still languages. I'm reading lots of easy books in Spanish and getting better at it. It's really amazing. It's lots of fun. If I meet someone, I want to know what language they speak. That's the story. Pretty good, huh?
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Professor Stephen. I would like to ask the next question. So what are the main components of your theory of
the main component,
and which we can contextualize like in Nepal, like in a foreign language learning context?
Okay. The main part of the theory, which I didn't believe in this theory in the beginning. In the beginning, I thought you learn languages by grammar, by study. You learn the rules, you memorize them. You thought about grammar all the time. I had grammar flashcards, vocabulary. That's what I did in the beginning. That's what I did with Amharic, which is one of my worst languages, okay? And I realized it must be something different. And it's the research and my own experiences that changed me, that led me to the theory. The theory says, which some of you have heard of, that we have two ways of getting better in a language. You can acquire a language, you can learn a language, and they're very different. Do we have time for me to give you a brief language lesson and I can illustrate the point?
Yes.
Let's take a minute. I'm going to give you two very quick language lessons in a language you've probably heard before, but I don't think many of the people watching this speak.
Yes.
I'll give you two lessons. You tell me which one is better. In the language, as you will see, is German. Okay, wir werden jetzt anfangen, Deutsch zu lernen. Und ich möchte im Voraus sagen, dass nach meiner Meinung Deutsch ist eine sehr schöne Sprache. Und ich hoffe, dass Sie alle sehr viel Erfolg mit Deutsch haben werden. Not a good lesson, obviously. Too fast, words you didn't know. You're not going to acquire very much from that. Here's lesson number 2. And you have to watch me on the screen. Das ist mein Kopf. Kopf.
Yeah.
Ich habe zwei Ohren. Ich habe zwei Augen. Ja, 2 Augen. Und hier sind meine Zigaretten. Ja, meine Zigaretten. Ach, ich habe keine Zigaretten. Zigaretten sind nicht gut. If you understood lesson number 2, not every word, but more or less, I did everything necessary to teach you German. Here's the big secret. We acquire language in one way and only one way, when we understand it. Comprehension is the way we do language acquisition, not by study, not by speaking, not by going to the country.
Not by speaking. By reading?
Not speaking. It's listening and reading.
Exactly.
Is how we acquire. There's no other way. If you understood some of lesson number 2, not every word, but some, you acquired a little German. Now, I want to share with you some amazing, wonderful facts about language acquisition.
Great.
And I'm still very impressed with these. Amazing, wonderful fact, number 1. Language acquisition is involuntary. If you understood what I said in German in the second lesson, you acquire German whether you wanted to or not. Chomsky, one of my great heroes,
Yeah.
Chomsky says the language acquisition device is like a mental organ. It's
Yeah.
with us all the time. You
Yes.
can't turn it off. Like if you open your eyes and there's light in the room and you're awake, you see. You can't decide not to see. You can't decide not to hear.
Yeah.
It's involuntary. It's part of being a human being. That is the amazing breakthrough. Also, it's not difficult to acquire languages. In fact, it's easy and automatic if you are getting interesting and comprehensible input. The ability to speak is the result of language acquisition, not the cause. More speaking will not help you. More listening and reading, yes. I'm discovering this in my own work.
Oh,
I told you I've been working with German, reading
okay.
lots and lots. I'm not German, with the Spanish. Lots and lots. Spanish-speaking people in Southern California are so friendly. It's so easy. They're very generous with Spanish, so I
Mm.
don't have a hard time with that. Anyway, uh, people have asked me, says, well, your Spanish is really getting better. How are you doing it? So I'm reading these easy stories, lots and lots of them. I'm not speaking very much.
You're just
I
listening.
am not speaking very much. I am reading. And when I can, I do some listening and it comes. It's
Uh,
the whole theory says it's comprehensible input
input.
that makes it possible. That is the theory. And that's quite radical, I think, because people say
Okay.
we learn to speak by speaking. No, we don't. The
Right.
speaking comes later. In fact, here's another interesting part. I think you'll identify with this. If you start to speak right away, you'll have trouble.
Mm.
This happened to me when I was a beginning English teacher. We had
Really?
to give sample lessons, and a supervisor was watching us. And I told a story to the students, which I thought was a good idea. I still think it was a good idea.
Yeah.
The supervisor says, no, no, no. You shouldn't be talking. The students should be talking. I
Exactly.
was right. The supervisor was wrong. We didn't know that then, not his fault. He didn't know. But
Yeah.
we get language through listening and through reading. That is the cornerstone of the theory. So, good books, reading for pleasure, a few interesting friends, maybe. Television can help if it's comprehensible. That is the whole theory right there. Comprehensible input. How about that?
Okay. And
So, here
how
are my
can
notes.
educators optimize its delivery in the classroom? The
What they
comprehensive.
can do is get methods, use methods that rely on comprehensible input.
Okay.
Um, I'll tell you an incident that happened to me, how I discovered the key to methodology. I was driving on Pacific Coast Highway
Mhm.
between my house and Los Angeles, and I used to do it twice a week. I would go into the city. It's like a 40-minute ride. Okay.
Yeah.
I wanted to see my grandchildren, of course, addiction to grandchildren. And I wanted to go to Venice Beach and lift weights because there was a weightlifting area. And sometimes Arnold would come. Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
And he would chat with us and talk with us. And oh, it was really nice. Anyway, so I did that twice a week, 45. What do you do in the car for 45 minutes? Well, first I listened to the radio. No.
Okay.
The news, forget it. It's all Donald Trump. I had enough. Okay. After that, I started listening to music, and that was frustrating. My background is music, music history, all this piano. Um, and the radio stations, they found out which music was popular.
Mm.
For me, it was the classics,
Okay.
Brahms, Beethoven, the Beatles, the Bee Gees. These are the classic composers. They took all the popular music and they put it on stations where you had to pay.
Okay.
So that didn't work. Okay. I found the solution. I stopped at the Santa Monica Library. And at the time, she still is, my daughter was working there. So that was great. I could say hello to her.
Mm.
And I went into this section of audiobooks, listening to stories in the car. It worked. It was wonderful. You could rent audiobooks or take them out for free. Now, audiobooks, I wanted stories in other languages. They didn't have them, they were all English.
Mhm.
Because I was a college professor, I wanted classics. No. They didn't have that. Only bestsellers in English. So that's what I took out. It was great. I was pleasantly surprised by the quality of best-selling novels. My
Mm,
first choice was Harry Potter. Harry
okay,
Potter #1.
great.
Harry Potter, by the way, was written for us, written for educators, because it's all about Harry and Hermione and Ron and his friends, what happened in classes. J.K. Rowling is brilliant in education. I just love them. So I listened to all 7 several times. And after that, I went to the other. I took historical novels, romance novels, legal novels. It was all pretty good. I developed a big respect for popular everyday literature.
Okay.
And I decided to, got the idea that this is the core of our language teaching. I'll give you 3 words that mean the same thing: literature, fiction, and stories. Same word.
Okay.
And I started working with a method that did that. This was developed by my colleague, Beniko Mason, who developed it teaching English as a foreign language in Japan. The first part, people come into language class. The teacher tells them stories.
Wow.
What a beautiful way to start the day. Your first class in the morning is English, and you hear nice stories. Her job was to select stories that have stood the test of time, that are
Mm,
universal interest, like Grimm's fairy tales.
yeah,
She would
exactly.
change them, make them comprehensible, uh, put words on the board, act them out, draw pictures, make them comprehensible. She got very good results. We found out some of the students were underlining the words they didn't know and making flashcards. We found out that if you did that, it wasn't worth it. It was the stories that did it. You hear a good story, you don't have to understand every word, just a lot of it. And you can hear it again, et cetera. And you gradually get better.
Yeah, you can
After a
anticipate.
semester, right, after a semester or more of story listening, she brought in books reading. The
Mm,
first day of class, I found very clever what she did. Students would come into the classroom, a big table in the middle, lots of graded readers in English, like the Longman series, the Newberry series, really good stories, a lot of them. The students took their own books, it was their own choice. I
wow.
think self selected reading is the best way to make sure
Wow.
it's interesting and comprehensible, of course. So they
Mm,
would try things out, get started. They didn't like a book, they wouldn't finish it, they'd find one they like. The results have been spectacular. We
mm,
found we used the TOEIC test as a measure. The TOEIC test, the scores are 1 to 1,000. If you score 250, you're ready to start reading. So that's students started there. We found students after a semester or 2 of reading went way up on the TOEIC. They would go from 250 all the way to 600, 700, 800. They were beginning to acquire academic English just by self-selected pleasure reading.
yeah,
So that
really
was a
pleasure.
big success.
Yeah.
Now, this allows me to go on to a related topic. I want to tell you about the rest of the research on reading
Okay.
because I'm very impressed with this. I did a whole book on this called The Power of Reading, which
Wow.
is available to you for free, boys
Yeah.
and girls. It's at sdkrashen.com. Many of my books and papers are there, and you can download them, share them with your friends. I
Yeah.
don't do them because I'm generous. I
Okay.
do this because the books are so expensive, nobody can afford them.
Yeah.
So I'm giving them away. Some of my colleagues, my colleague Jeff McQuillan is doing this too, giving away his papers, his articles, et cetera. Otherwise, we have no choice. So all this stuff is there. Study after study.
Mm,
Reading is a fabulous form. I want to tell you about one experiment that is my total favorite.
sure.
And this is one of many, many, many. It was done by my former student, Fei Shin. I'm still in touch with her. She's a very interesting, good student. Anyway, she worked with a girl named Sophie. Sophie was limited in English when she came to the United States, California.
Okay.
She had had only, 2 years of study, and she started school and was in the ESL program, etc. Now, at her school, they gave you a test at the beginning of the year in English and a test at the end of the year to
Mm,
see how much you have improved.
Great.
Sophie got worse. Her
Mm.
English went down. Okay. Then she would go home to the summer, come back, take the test again. Her score was higher than it was 1 year before.
Wow, by reading.
School school did no good. What was she doing in the summer? Well, Los Angeles is kind of hot in the summer. So she went to the local air conditioned public library and
Wow.
she started reading books in English for young students, for young
Mm.
people. Sweet Valley High, Nancy Drew, things like that. Okay. And she averaged 50 books each summer. She wasn't doing it to improve her English. She was relaxing and having a good time.
Yeah.
Okay. Her mom would drive her to the library, and a couple of times mom couldn't do it. She and her brother took the bus to the library every day and found the books. This is a dramatic demonstration that
It was
reading is
self-directed, like self-selective books for her.
self
Self.
selected. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Just what she found in the library, try
Mhm.
things out, etc. So,
Mhm.
what I've concluded from this library is super important, access to books is super important, and self selection. I'm
Wow.
not going to stop here. I'm going to anticipate your next question. Okay.
Okay.
What can you do? Okay.
Sure.
Okay. I have all the controls. Um, Here's what we found in the last 4 years. The last 3, 4 years, most of the time, I've been home. I haven't gone anywhere.
Mhm.
Uh, I've had a great time. I tell people I'm home alone with my girlfriend, which is my wife, and we've only been married for like 55 years, so we're doing fine.
Yeah.
At home, I'm getting a lot of work done. I'm on Zoom with you, talking to other people. It's been wonderful. I've made huge progress in the last 3 years, and I want to tell you about it. First of all, reading gives you language, but there's more. Reading gives you knowledge.
Yes.
People who read a lot know more. They know more about nearly everything. And
Mm.
this means reading fiction as well. People who read lots of fiction know more about science, they know about social studies, they know more about technology. It's all there in the novels. They get a huge amount of information. In
Mm.
fact, I think it's better than assigning homework. The people, well, big study by a guy named Stanovich, 1983, I think, those people who are more familiar with everyday literature, popular authors, okay,
Okay.
and magazines know more about everything. That's where they get the. It's better than people. They know more than people with high grades. That reading novels and fiction is tremendous. So that's two things. Reading gives you language, no question, vocabulary, grammar, all these things. Number two, reading gives you knowledge. Okay.
Yeah.
Number three, reading helps you understand other people.
Um,
It gives you empathy. A radio broadcaster said this once on the radio. I thought it was great. When you read fiction, you become the character. You
mm.
go where they go. It gives you a deep understanding of other people. So I'll tell you who else said this. Noam Chomsky, in one of his books, said this. He said, I think we will someday understand more about other people and psychology from novels
Mm.
than from reading, scientific psychology. So we've got three things here. We've got language, we've got knowledge, and empathy for other people comes from reading, and that includes reading fiction. It's
Mm.
very good for us. So I've gotten a new respect for novels, fiction, etc. Um, Assigned reading doesn't work very well, as we know. The research confirms this. My colleague Seeingly did a study on this. They did assigned reading of books they thought the students would like. No, self-selection was better. All right.
Yes.
Um, I'm forgetting where it was. Oh yes, my adventures. I'm going to give you anecdote instead of experiment because I
Sure.
think it's more exciting.
Yeah, I want to
When I
listen.
was when I was in secondary school, high school in the United States,
Okay.
in the state of Illinois, in Chicago area, we had language arts. We had reading the class. One year it was fiction, the next year it was nonfiction, British literature, English literature, etc. I read all the books.
Mm,
I wrote all the papers. I took all the exams. I passed. I don't remember a single book that I read in secondary school.
mm,
They're gone. It doesn't stick. I remember all the fiction I read that I selected myself. I got from friends, etc. I read only two genres, and this was my education. I'm telling you now, my language arts education. I read two genres. Number one, I read science fiction.
mm.
I read Robert Heinlein, Isaac Asimov, etc. Brilliant, wonderful. My colleague Jeff McQuillan found a paper that said if you read science fiction, you get all the vocabulary, grammar that you need for all areas of science. Isn't that beautiful? I only read scientific literature in linguistics, but occasionally I read in other areas like nutrition. Should I take this diet? I can read the studies, pre-test, post-test. A lot of that comes from science fiction. So that's what I read. The second thing I read, baseball stories. Okay. I found a favorite author, John R. Tunis. John R. Tunis wrote 9 fiction novels about a baseball team that he made up, the Brooklyn Dodgers, and what happened to their players. I read all 9. I love them. I learned so much from the baseball stories. Okay. As growing up in the United States, baseball was everything. Okay. So there's easy to, encyclopedic knowledge, as my friends all did. We all thought we were going to be professional baseball players. Didn't turn out, fortunately. Anyway, I'll tell you about a couple of them which really changed me. The first one was a story called The Kid from Tompkinsville. The Kid from Tompkinsville was reviewed in a literature journal. And the author said, The Kid from Tompkinsville is the boy's book of Job. It's about suffering, it's about tragedy and coming back again and again. The Kid from Tompkinsville is about a high school baseball player who is invited to join the major leagues, the big time. He's a pitcher. He throws the ball and hitters try to hit it. He's brilliant. He went to the major leagues when he was like 19 years old and was unbeatable. He won every game he started. He was a superstar. Then tragedy. At the end of the season, he slipped, fell in the shower, and hurt his elbow. He couldn't pitch. He could throw the ball, but not to be a pitcher. Okay. After a little bit of training, summer, he was a good hitter, a good fielder. He joined the major leagues again and played a different position. He turned out to be a star at that different position. He found another path. It's the book of Job. Find a way. My favorite one, this one changed my life forever, and I hope it will change yours for the better. It's called The Keystone Kids. There's a major league team, the Dodgers, and the manager retires, the director, the boss. The owner selects one of the players to become the manager. This player is really too young. He's only like 32 years old. The manager is usually someone in their 50s, and he's still playing. He became a player manager because the owner thought he was brilliant, which he was. His name was Spike. Okay. The first day he took over the team, he gave them a sermon. He wanted to get their respect. And he says, This is what I want you guys to do. When you're at bat and you hit the ball, in the major leagues, someone's going to catch it. They're going to throw it to first base. You'll be out. Don't worry. 99 times out of 100, you'll be out. You won't get to first base. Run as fast as you can anyway. The player could drop the ball. The throw could be wild. In other words, be perfect. The word I like is impeccable. One of my friends was my doctor, Dr. Pearl. He's now Seymour. We're buddies. And I told him he loved baseball. He started reading these books. And he said, this business of impeccable is important if you're a doctor. You have a patient and his symptoms are ordinary. You give him this medicine, he'll be fine. Be impeccable. Make sure it's the right medicine. Make sure he takes it. Make sure there are no side effects. They're very rare, but be impeccable. I have adopted this through my entire life from the Spaceball story. So when I wash the dishes, I make sure I dry them, put them away, etc. Take out the garbage, make sure it's in the right container. Everything you do, impeccability is a virtue. This you get from fiction. So I've said three big things. Reading gives you language. It gives you knowledge. Okay?
Great. Yeah.
And in fiction, it gives you this understanding of other people and philosophies you wouldn't get anywhere else.
Great.
So I'm a big fan of fiction. I've not allowed you to ask any more questions. Let me pause now, see if you
Yeah, one thing I would like to ask, like, what is your perspective on the formal grammar instructions in second language learning context?
Wait, what is my, on what? Repeat the question, please.
Yeah.
I'm old and hard of hearing.
Okay, what is your perspective on the role of the grammar instructions in
grammar.
Yeah,
Grammar. Okay.
role of grammar.
Well, it's not just my opinion, it's the opinion of the great polyglots of the world. And I've studied what they say, etc. For example, Stephen Kaufman, a friend of mine now, speaks 20 languages. Can you imagine? He did 10 of them after age 60. This is wonderful. And I've been with him. I've seen him speak these languages. He's really good. So great inspiration. He says, don't worry about grammar. He says, sometimes he looks up the grammar rule. If he understands it, he may remember it, and then he forgets it. He says, I get a better feel for grammar from listening and from reading. Lom Kato, a Hungarian polyglot who did all her language acquisition at home in Hungary, said the same thing. These people say that grammar is kind of vanity. It's not worth it. Lom Kato said, grammar study for adults should be optional. I think that's very nice. For children, no. Grammar for children is absurd. I'm quoting her directly. So grammar's okay if you're curious, if you think it's interesting. I fell in love with Chomsky linguistics, okay? And I think it's beautiful, but I'm crazy, okay? This is not normal, okay? He says, oh, what Kaufman said, which I really like, he said, sometimes when he looks up a new word or a grammar thing in a book, he forgets it by the time he comes back to the book. He said, it's vanity, grammar. You don't need it. This one changed my life. I consider Kaufman to be my language therapist. He's helped me so much.
Yeah.
He says, don't worry about making mistakes. Nobody cares. Isn't that brilliant? Nobody cares if you make a mistake. This is not
I
a
agree.
language
I agree.
class.
Yeah.
That is beautiful advice. All language students need to know that. The people want to know what you're saying, not if you get the rule correct.
Yeah.
I remember I went to Mexico a few years ago and I did a course. I hung out with the teachers, I went to classes and all that. And I just read Kaufman's advice before that. And I decided I was going to have breakfast, lunch, and dinner with language teachers, talking to them in Spanish. Okay. And I decided then I would pay attention to what he said. When we got together and I talked to the teachers, we gossiped. We had a good time. I didn't worry about my mistakes. And that has stuck with me ever since. When I speak Spanish, French, any of the languages I know, I don't think about making mistakes. Oh, that was wrong. Just have a good time. That has helped me a lot. That's the best advice I have ever had.
Yes. Thank you.
Language acquisition.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great advice. So I would like to ask you the final question, like how the educators like in Nepal or in South Asia, in the English as a foreign language or second language context. So how do language teachers want to implement your theories in the language classroom settings? What is your advice?
Tell them stories.
Okay.
Lots of them. And if they don't understand, they'll understand most of it. They can say, what was that again or something, but not a big deal. Intermediate, get them on a program of self-selected reading. You want a big collection of If it's English, Longman and Newberry and all those things. That's the whole idea. The one question I want to answer, though, that you haven't asked is what about writing? Should we have students write? I'm glad you asked because I love this question. Okay.
Sure, you can integrate now. Yeah.
Okay, good. This is my favorite topic now, writing.
Okay.
More writing will not make you a better writer. Writing style comes from reading. If you read a lot, you'll develop a good writing style. But writing does something else, something completely different. And this is my discovery the last 2-3 years, and it has helped me enormously. Writing can make you smarter. It can clarify your thinking. When you're writing and you come to a place where you don't know what comes next, you have what's called a writer's block. Be happy. That means you're about to learn something new. Let me tell you the wisdom of Poincaré, the mathematician who worked with Albert Einstein. He wrote brilliant papers on mathematical thinking and all that. My son's a mathematician, so I always look at these things. It's fascinating. He says, when I get stuck in my math, I get up from the table and I do something mindless. I put wood on the fire, that's all, and come back. It takes like a minute or two. When I come back, the writer's block is a little less problems. I see a little bits of the answer. Each time I take a break, I see a little bit more. Your subconscious mind will solve the problem for you. Your subconscious mind wants to help you. I'm going to conclude. We still have moments for one more story? Okay. I'm going to conclude by telling you about my secret life in hotels. Okay. What do I do when I go to a conference? I get a hotel room. I'm supposed to give a paper the next day. I come into the room, take out my computer, and start working on my papers. Then I get a writer's block. I get writer's blocks every 5 minutes, all the time. I get up from the desk, go to my suitcase, open it up, take out 2 shirts and hang them up. Go back to work. I do that again and again. My life is writer's block break, over and over again, and it makes life very easy. At the end of the evening, my work is done. I've had new ideas. Take a break. Allow the subconscious mind to solve your problem. That's how writing can make you smarter. That's why I don't like these artificial intelligence, the writing programs, the bots, because you're avoiding the most important part of writing. The computer's doing it for you. Do it yourself. Find problems, solve them, and your thinking will get better. Okay, I've talked enough. Your turn.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your wonderful time. And so I'm so blessed to have you today in this series, like many Asians, mainly in South Asians, educators, especially in Nepal, the educators who are teaching, who have been teaching and learning English, both. So as you made me learn more because of reading, the more I input, the more I can output. So this is a result of
Good.
your talk. So thank you so much for your input and ideas. And I'll write something to your emails. Anything
Okay.
final comment?
Good libraries, self-selection. Good
Wow.
libraries, self-selection. Good libraries, self-selection.
Thank you. Thank you
Easy.
so much.